Got a very special guest. We've got Steelers legend, Purple Heart recipient, Bronze Star recipient, four-time Super Bowl champion. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rocky Bleier. Rocky, has everything going for you?
It's going well, Zach. Thank you. Nice to be able to talk to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking time. So first up, we got to talk about your Steelers. Started the season on a great stretch, but they've dropped two in a row, including one to a team with no name. Are you concerned?
Yeah, I'm concerned. On the surface, they're 11-2. Okay, and so you go, all right, fine. Given what they've done, but they won some games early. Just by the bare minimum, then they won the game. Nobody asks at the end of the season how you got there. All they want to know is what the result is, and the best result, obviously, is if you get and go to the Super Bowl. That's the only thing that really counts. Nobody goes back and say, well, it's just like it was like undefeated seasons. Now, not to make undefeated seasons, and I got to bring this up, which is the Patriots go 16-0, and nobody remembers that because they lost the Super Bowl. That's what they remember. Yep. So anyway, my concern about the Steelers at this moment in time is that they started off strong. They had a dominant team. They have a depth team. Caught some of the other opposing teams off guard, especially with COVID, some people missing, and lack of practice and so on. And that experience that they had helped them through that early stage of life. But when you get to this point with 4 games remaining, you have to have consistency. I mean, consistency all the way around. And they came up against 2 teams, Washington and Buffalo, back to back. Washington did a wonderful job on their defense of being able to cover people, stopping the run, and so on. I'm sure that Buffalo took a chapter out of that book and looked at it and said, okay, and they did a wonderful job and better job stopping our defense. I mean, their offensive line. So now we got, the next game is tonight against Cincinnati. Do you think Cincinnati hasn't watched those 2 games and see what they can do and have the personnel to do it? So what really needs to happen at this moment in time for the Steelers is, they need to concentrate more. I think there's I see a lack of team enthusiasm or team destiny, that this is what needs to be done. They're just kind of riding the tide, as they say, and we have enough talent to be able to get us into the playoffs or wherever it is. I just don't see that hunger at this moment in time like they had early in the season.
Do you think this adversity will just help them in the long term?
Well, hopefully. I mean, so it's a lesson to be learned. Okay, so I'm sure as the reports were this week, or the week leading up to Buffalo, is that their coach was extremely mad, I should say, and focused on what needs to be done, and we have to do this. So Tomlin, kind of set that tone, yelled, screamed, whatever. So now he's got 2 back-to-back games coming into the Cincinnati game. So what's he screaming this week? You got to get to a point where you can control the ball offensively, and the best offense is a good defense, and being able, and the best defense is a good offense, being able to control the football, and it's just not there yet, or it's missing. So hopefully, against Cincinnati, they've made those adjustments and can come off the ball.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little about your career. So I saw, so you went to Notre Dame. What led to you deciding to go there?
Oh, a long time ago. So anyway, it was a few years ago. At that time, so I'll tell you this, is that I came out of a small town in Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin, and what people have to put into the mix is that they didn't have football did not have all the exposure that it has today. I mean, there wasn't all the channels that we have and all the television coverage and all the sports coverage and of all colleges and so on. So it was kind of regionalized. And so we grew up not being big fans of, any sports team specifically, and you just kind of went around along your life. Well, having success in high school, and so then you get recognized. And so we as a high school team were an undefeated team throughout my playing career. We had never lost a football game, and we were the number one ranked team in the state of Wisconsin. And because of that success, well, you kind of get recognized. And so I got scholarship offers to Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Big Ten schools specifically, some Division II schools, and Notre Dame contacted us, and so on. You go, okay, fine. Probably the best piece of advice that I received was from the Notre Dame recruiter or assistant coach who was recruiting Wisconsin, and he was a good salesman. But anyway, he said this. He said, "Listen, you're probably going to get a lot of scholarships, and when you go and take those road trips to those schools for a visit, they're going to roll out the red carpet. So week after week after week that you go, every school is going to look like the best school that you've gone to. So by the time you have to make the decision of where you want to go to school, it's going to be a more difficult decision to make." He said, "My recommendation," he said, "choose 3 schools that you would like to graduate from. Not play football at, but to graduate from, because there's no guarantee about a future. Anybody can get hurt and so on. This way you have a scholarship and you're in education." So he said, "Put that in the mix." I thought that made perfect sense to me. So I had gone, and so I went to the University of Notre Dame on a recruiting trip, went to the University of Wisconsin because that was my home state, then went out to Boston College and looked at that school. Loved Boston, being from the Midwest. Not necessarily Boston College, but just Boston. Okay, so then I came back and I did what every good Catholic boy was taught to do, and that was to go to church, pray. And then, like every good Catholic boy, I did what my mother wanted me to do, and that was to go to Notre Dame. And so I ended up at Notre Dame. No, but I ended up at Notre Dame. It was a good fit. It was a small school. There was only like 3,500 kids, at the school at the time, and it had a reputation. They had a losing 10-year period from 53 to 63. Things weren't, and they only won 2 games the year before I went there, but things changed, and they came in and they got a coach by the name of Ara Parsegian who'd come in, and all of a sudden they went to 9-1 and put themselves back on the map. And from there, we got a chance to play. And by my junior year, we won the national championship. And
that's awesome.
And so that was it.
That's awesome. And then, so at what point did the NFL come into your radar?
Oh, not really until my senior year in college did I think maybe possible. It was one of those things. I wasn't an All-American. I got a chance to play a couple of years, my junior and my senior year, as the starting running back, was captain of the football team. In the back of my mind, growing up just outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and that was when Lombardi came in during the 60s and kind of put professional football on the map, at least for Wisconsinites. And so I thought, well, maybe, you might get a chance to play. And so there wasn't the push as there is today. There wasn't the media attention that there was today and back then. And so I can remember going to a Green Bay Packer game. I was after my senior year, towards the end of their season. Our season had finished, and my dad and I went. And I thought to myself, "Oh, I wonder if anybody's on the squad that's my size." I looked at Green Bay. No, they're all bigger. So then they were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, just as I remember. And so I'm looking at the roster of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and there's a guy my size. Jim Cannonball Butler was his name, like 5'9.5", 190 pounds. But he had one thing I didn't have, that was speed. So, but anyway, that was my first thought of, hey, maybe I might be able to play in the NFL and so on. So we didn't get drafted into the NFL until was actually February. The draft was earlier than it is today, so it was in February thereafter, and so I got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not a highly touted draft choice. I was not their first choice. I did not make their top 10 list. I was the 417th person picked in the draft. I was the 16th round draft choice. They don't have those anymore.
Yeah. Do you happen to recall who the number one pick in that year's draft was?
The number one pick?
Overall?
No, I erased that from my mind. I didn't want to know him. I did not want to know. I don't get a little jealous, but that's all right.
Yeah. So I have a question. So you were actually drafted twice in 1968. Who drafted you the second time?
Well, Uncle Sam did, because there was this little conflict that was going on over there at that period of time.
Just a little
conflict called Vietnam, and so a lot of kids were on the radar. Obviously, at that time, it wasn't an all-volunteer service like we have today. The draft was in vogue. Anybody at the age of 18 was eligible for the draft. You got a student deferment for 4 years, or unless you flunked out of school, then you became eligible. So I finished my 4 years, got the Steelers, went through the training camp, and I then got my 1A classification, meaning I was eligible for the draft. And Steelers said, well, don't worry, we'll take care of this for you. And, thinking that, well, they get me in the reserve of the National Guard or whatever it was, and take care of that responsibility. But it was 1968, just to put things in perspective. It was the height of the war, where there was 500,000 soldiers over in Vietnam. So they needed bodies, and all the reserves, National Guards, they were filled. They didn't have spots open and so on. And anyway, it was a thing. I fell through the cracks, and I got my draft notification. And then all of a sudden, my world was turned upside down in another direction, and went off to basic training, and eventually ended up in Vietnam.
Wow. What was your first experience when you first got to Vietnam?
Well, I was, because the only thing about Vietnam, and the only thing that I knew about Vietnam was what I saw on television, what you read in the paper, and some of my high school friends who had served, got either after high school or dropped out of college or whatever, and some of their feedback about it, and that was it, So we're flying over, and we fly into Saigon, and I didn't know what to expect, and we're landing, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, we unload the plane, and then we got to run, because they'd be firing and shooting at us. And the plane landed, and we got off the plane, and we got on a bus, and there's barbed wire all over the bus windows, and I'm thinking, I was waiting for somebody in the streets to shoot us or whatever might happen, but none of that took place. And so you got to the base camp, and you went through orientation, and then ultimately that was for a period of time, and I went out and joined my unit who was up in the field. And so how Notre Dame operated for the field personnel specifically is that we worked in an area of operation, and we worked usually out of 2 landing zones. The landing zones were on mountains or hillsides, and they were where the artillery was located to cover the area in which the troops would be covering. So you were in a rotation 1 week on one hilltop doing bunker guard. The second week or 10 days, you're down in the field. And then you go back up on the second hill, and you just rotate in through that area for the period of time that you're there. Well, my team was up on LZ West, and they had to take in a sweep off for the day, down off the hill, looked around an area. Now they're coming back up. So as they're coming back up, I'm looking at them, and honest to goodness, at least from my first perspective, they looked like all those soldiers I saw in the movies that were, had that 1,000-yard stare, that hadn't shaved. They were older than they looked older than they were, kind of dragging them going, oh, this is really. So anyway, so that was my first reaction. And that's when I got into my unit at that time.
Wow. Did you have any contact with your family while you were in Vietnam, like just mailing letters back and forth? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, that was our like everybody else, that was the biggest.
Yeah.
And so you'd write letters, but they'd overlap, 2-3 weeks, by the time they got out, you got back, and, so, yeah. And I got, and it just, I got those letters that tucked away somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a question. So the first time I ever heard about the Vietnam War, it was either in class. I vividly remember it from Forrest Gump when he
Right.
first got there. How
Yes.
accurate was that depiction of like where they were, similar to where you were? Was it pretty accurate, or was it way off?
Oh no! I mean, I throughout Vietnam, there were different areas at different times and so on. So, as I recall, Forrest Gump, and that experience, I had no problems with it. I mean, my first reaction was that, yeah, it was, it was similar things like that had happened and, took place. And so, yeah, so that was pretty, they covered it.
Interesting. And then, so fast forward about a year in, you unfortunately, you have an incident. Can you depict what happened?
So what had taken place in my case specifically is that there, just for a little background information, there was a movement that was happening between the military, between the Army and the Marines who were north of us. There was an NVA regiment from North Vietnam working its way down into our area of operation. And so that was intelligence. And so now we're working with the Marines. I found out this all later. I didn't know anything that was taking place at the time. Like most privates don't know anything that's taking place. But so anyway, so that what was happening. Now I'm on LZ Siberia, which was our other LZ that we worked out of. And all of a sudden we get a call to be on alert, 24-hour alert. The enemy's whatever is in the area. There's something going on. And all of a sudden we are alerted to get ready. We're flying off the LZ down into the valley. One of our sister companies had been hit, and they're in a big firefight that was taking place. We were to get in, get down, help them get out of that situation as best we possibly can. We don't get to them until late at night. Firing had ceased, although there was some action taking place. Remember walking in the jungles as darkness was coming upon us. Helicopters were flying over us into the LZ to pick up dead, wounded, get them out of there. Tracers were going through the night at one another. Helicopter got hit a couple times, and I saw that. And so by the time we got to that unit, the firing had ceased. So kind of had to reassess the situation. There were some shots here or there that was taking place. And then the word came down, okay, fine, that we were going to pull front and rear security, get the remaining personnel out of that area, and carry what dead were left behind. So we're just moving everybody out and before they got the coordinations of where they were to put mortar fire into that spot. So as we're going out, we hit a quick firefight with a machine gun nest trying to cross a stream. And all of a sudden the word came, leave the bodies, get out of here. We'll come back and pick them up 2 days later or anyway. So that was 2 days later. That was part of our mission as we're moving out of there. The reinforced platoon I was with. And so we were just about 8 o'clock in the morning trying to find our location. And we moved out on an open rice paddy. Word was to keep 5 yards distance between one another, keep your eyes and your ears open, head on the swivel. Enemy, obviously, they're around here. Point man all of a sudden saw a movement across the berm. And in his excitement, he made a fatal mistake. He didn't hold everybody up, but he shot, hollered gook gook. They started to run. He started to chase them, pulling everybody out in the middle of the race paddy. When the machine gun started to level the area, you could just see bodies diving into the race paddies to get under cover. From in front of me, behind me, 4 guys were out in the open, pinned down. And so I carried a grenade launchers. And so it was my responsibility to be able to get some firepower on that position. They're about 150 yards away, maybe 200 yards away up in the hillside. So I reached my grenade, rolled over my side, and that's when I got hit the first time through the left thigh. And so dropped back behind some protection, got enough firepower on that position, got the 4 guys who were pinned down, got out of there. The medic came back, and he and I crawled back to our commanding officer behind us. 20 minutes later, the rest of that platoon came crawling in. We set up another defensive position. They probed our perimeter and got close enough when a grenade comes flying through the air. And I catch it out of the corner of my eye, and it hits my commanding officer right in the middle of the back, and it bounces off of him. And it rolls towards where I am, and I try to jump out of the way. At that moment, it blows up, and it blows up to my right foot, knee, and thigh. So again, I'm hit for the second time, and we have another firefight when a platoon finally fought its way down and got us out of there and started dragging us out of there. So we didn't get back to secured area until like midnight that night throughout the jungle. So that's what happened.
So I saw that they moved you to a hospital in Tokyo.
Yes.
So
Anyway, so you get out, so you get out of the field, you get on the helicopter, they take you to an aid station. They quickly assess your situation. The biggest problem over there was infection. So what they try to do is they try to get you out of country as if you got open wounds, so they wrap you as best they possibly can. And so I go to an aid station, then I go to Da Nang. As I'm processing out, they fly me to Tokyo, to the field hospital in Tokyo, where I spend 3 weeks in the hospital there. And then I come back to the States and end up at Fort Riley, Kansas. And I spent 9 months in the hospital there. Had 3 more operations and so on and so on. But so I was in Tokyo. And the thing that was, when I was in Tokyo, or at least in my mind, the biggest thing that I had going for me, or not going for me, but my thought process was wanting to come back and play football. I mean, became very focused, and that's what I wanted to do. And so, at least I wanted to know how damaged I was. I mean, the extent of my injuries. Now, listen, we've all been injured before, no matter what we've done, whether we played in the backyard or played organized sports or something. We've always had bumps and bruises and sprains and tears and breaks or whatever. And there was kind of a lesson that we learned, which is that what's the lesson? It heals, and then you go back out and play, and you find yourself back in the backyard again. Yeah. So so I got enough courage to ask the doc. I said, what do you think? Do you think that I'll be able to come back and play this? And he very basically said, don't worry about it. You're going to have a normal life. You're going to do things normal people do. Don't expect to get on the gridiron. You just wanted the strength and flexibility. And so it just kind of like, sucked that hope out, that we had. And, and probably saving grace, or at least for me at that time, was 2 days later, honestly, not 2 days later, I got a postcard in the mail. A little postcard had 2 lines on it. Said, "Rock, team's not doing well. We need you. Art Rooney, owner of the Steelers." And you go, oh, somebody needs you. So I give you the little sense, whether they needed me or not, that wasn't the case, but they give you a little sense of, a little hope somebody's concerned, somebody cares. But it was something I hung on to, and it drove me to do better as time goes on and get ready to go back to camp. And so I went back to camp when I got out of the service in 70, and they invited me to come back. It just beat me up, that camp, and I really wasn't ready to come, but we weren't going to turn it down. But they put me on injured reserve that year. needed another operation, in which they gave me. I had some shrapnel working its way out. And the following year, I went to training camp again, limped through it, but it was okay. It made the developmental squad. So they bought me 2 years of an opportunity to be able to play, to heal, give me a chance. And so I'm ever grateful for that opportunity. And then I got a chance to come back, and I made the team, special teams primarily, and then got a chance to play a little bit more. And by 1974, got a chance to break into the starting backfield, and we go to the Super Bowl.
That's awesome. I have a question. So knowing what you went through with your gruesome injury, even though yours was on the battlefield compared to Alex Smith's, who was on the football field, even though a lot of people compared it to a military injury, do you understand what's going through his mind of why he wanted to get back and play?
Oh yeah, very much so. Because I think, it's the nature of the beast, if I may say so. And in all athletes, and I don't care at what level, because I've seen it, in junior high, I've seen it in high school, I've seen in college as well. That players get hurt, but they feel like they let the team down. They feel like and they all want to come back. They have this driving force to whatever level it might be, and so it's kind of inbred of wanting to achieve, not wanting to disappoint, wanting to be a part of something. And so so it drives you to do more and more and more and more.
So when you were with the Steelers, who was the toughest defense for you to get through? Or did you playing against who gave you the most problems on the
or I should say, probably the teams at the time that gave us the most problems were Houston Oilers and Oakland Raiders, two big rivals, at that time. Houston was in our division, so we had to play Houston twice. They were Cincinnati was tough at that time. Oakland was always tough, when we would play them, and we may play them a couple times a year, once maybe during the season, and then always into the playoffs. Early part, we got a chance to play them. So so they were just physical games, big, tough games.
What was your rehab process like to from getting there after getting the letter from Art Rooney to from that point until 74 when you're actually on the roster? What was that gruesome rehab like?
Well, so the biggest thing, probably one of the biggest things that I had was nerve damage in my foot. So I couldn't move my toes. I couldn't, and so I had to regenerate the nerve endings. And so we did that through electric pulse, and then exercises, and so, but it was a matter of this. I weighed, I came back from Vietnam, and I was in the hospital. I weighed 165 pounds. And so, you got to put the weight back on, and it'll come back on, but then, so when I was still in the service, and I was going through that period of time of mine, it was like outpatient. You were like an outpatient, so I wasn't staying in the hospital. I was rooming with 3 other soldiers, and we all had like a job on the base. But it allowed me to, and what I would do, my routine was I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then I go start running. And so as best I possibly could, a mile and a half, 2 miles, work on that, go to work, and then go to the gym and work out and lift for 2 hours, get some dinner, come back, and then run sprints as best I possibly can. My roommates thought I was nuts. And then go to bed and get up at 4:30 the next morning so we could do this process all over. But that became the focus, and that became the routine, and just to get your body weight back. And so I had continued that, when I did come back. So, but my problem was, so I went through the early years. In 1972, and we're just going in 1972. The Steelers hired their first stretching coach. Never before did they have an outside like stretching coach or, and so Paul Urim was his name, and he had worked with the United States Olympic team. And so he was from the Pittsburgh area. So he came in and, and he started talking about stretching and, and all the things that we know about it today, was being introduced at the time. So also, then I said, one of my problems was speed, or speed or quickness. And how can one increase its speed? More importantly, how can one increase its 40 time? Because that became, the criteria. When we talk about 40 times, even today, who runs the fast 45, 40, and so if you have a good 40 time, it makes a difference in the minds of people. So, you go, oh, okay, fine, So anyway, he introduced me to some other professors, and so then I went on this training program of increasing my speed. Not being a track guy, so it was a whole different thought process and format about running in a straight line, because ball players are taught to keep balance. If you've got natural quickness or speed, that's great. But if you're the average guy, it's something you have to work on. So the biggest thing was you had to work on your start. And you had to work on something. Anyway, I did. I worked. And I went to camp in 1973. And over this period of time, so that was the biggest I ever was. I in 1973 to make the team, I weighed 218 pounds. And I bench pressed 465 pounds. I squatted 600 pounds, and I ran 4.55, 4.6, 40. Yeah. That was the last time I ran a 40 for the remaining part of my whole career. I never ran another one thereafter.
That's wild. And then so fast forward to that first Super Bowl. You guys get there, but across from you is Alan Page and the Purple People Eaters. What was your thought process?
Well, they had been there before, and so they were a dominant team. They, as you said, they had the Purple People Eater. They had a great. Alan was a teammate of mine at Notre Dame, so we played together, but it was a Super Bowl, so it was competitive. And we played at Old Tulane Stadium. We were supposed to play at the Dome, but it wasn't finished for that Super Bowl. It was supposed to be, but it wasn't. So it transferred over into Old Tulane Stadium, and so we played the Super Bowl in Tulane Stadium in 1974 in New Orleans. Yeah. So, but it was just you got to a point where, they were tough, but we, the interesting thing about that, their offense, our defense played so well. Their offense only gained 17 yards rushing and scored 0 points. So it was a pretty good, chance that we might win that game. So,
I have a quick question about that. Was Ed Marinero on that team? Running back from where'd he go?
Yeah.
From I forget.
Yes, I think so.
I interviewed him.
I have to go back and look, but
I forgot. He went to one of the Ivies, and I know when I interviewed him, and I said,
"That's right."
Yeah, and I forgot which Ivy, and he goes, "Don't ever say that again." And I forgot it again. No, but yeah, that's wild. And then so fast forward a year later, you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated. You're probably getting all this media attention. What was that like?
Which are I gotta think of that cover. What cover was that?
Let's see. I think I have it.
Wait a second. Come on.
June 9th, 75. It says the headline: Rocky Bleier's War.
Okay, fine. Fine. That's covered. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm quick. That was cool. I mean, for me, that was like, wow. I mean, the cover of Sports Illustrated. I mean, you go, yeah, how did that happen? So it was all about that, our story and what we're talking about there, and overcoming that, going to the Super Bowl, that year, and having a successful team, and then that came out, and so that was, it was it was a nice thing to have.
Awesome. And then so fast forward back in the Super Bowl against Dallas this time. Is that Randy White?
Randy White, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I can't even remember that. And I'm drawing a blank. Quarterback. Why am I drawing a blank for Dallas?
Come on, you got it. You got it. Come on, Roger.
Oh, Staubach. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I know. I'm like, why am I drawing a blank? I'm like, I know it's not Danny White. So
Right, that's right.
Yeah. So knowing that you'd been there before, was there like a more ease in the locker room going into the game?
Yeah. So anyway. So this was the first game against the Cowboys in Super Bowl 10. Is that what you're talking about? Super Bowl 10. So we come back and so we're back and so we play the Cowboys. Now, yeah, I mean the Cowboys are tough. I mean the Cowboys are a tough team. Now we get a chance to we played them in an exhibition game, I think, and I think we played them once during the season. And then well, of course we get to meet them in the Super Bowl, and they're America's team, or maybe that came later, but at that time they were a very dominant dominant team. And so that because anything can happen in the Super Bowl, especially when you have a team of that caliber. And so it was a game that went back and forth, but ultimately we won by 4 points. In that game, a couple of things, but we had a pretty good lead. And that was Super Bowl. That was Super Bowl 13. We had a pretty good lead in that one, and they came.
You guys
back.
have been you were in a couple of them, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So anyway, so this one, the first one was. I'll tell you this. This was a probably in Super Bowl 10, probably the worst, or the most stupidest. I can't say stupidest. Probably the worst play that it was ever called in the Super Bowl. Took place. Okay, so here's the situation. We're in the fourth quarter, and we got a lead, but we got the ball like on our 48-yard line or so, and it was our 40. Okay, because it was our 43-yard line, and Bradshaw just got knocked out of the game on a touchdown to Lynn Swann on the series before. Hanratty's in the game now as a backup quarterback. So we got the ball, and it's third down and 7 yards to go for a first down. Okay. All of a sudden, there's a timeout. Chuck calls a timeout. Again, so I'm thinking, what's he going to call? 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 Okay, fine. I mean, here's the situation. You gotta at least throw it downfield. For a pass. If you're going to run it, give it to Franco. Obviously, he was having a good game. But if you throw it downfield, if they intercept it, it's like a punt. And no, it wasn't. Here's the deal. It was fourth down. It was fourth down and 7.
Okay.
And they call it timeout. Not third and 7, fourth and 7. Punt the ball. So he doesn't. And Henry comes back into the huddle. And I'm going to him. I go, what's the play? What's the play? He goes, come on, what's the play? He calls the play. The play was formation, 4 right split. 84 trap off to the right side. 84 trap. I'm carrying the ball for 7 yards. And we break the huddle, and I'm thinking, well, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. As we break the huddle, he says to me, run out as much time as you can. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a run out guy. Franco's a run out guy. He'll stutter step and he'll run back. I'm an A to B guy. I mean, just A to B. So the ball was snapped. I got it. Boom. 2 seconds. Tackled. They get the ball back on the 43-yard line. And I feel like I lost this game. If we lose this game, is because I didn't make that first down. But ultimately, I thought, now that was the stupidest play ever called in Super Bowl history.
And then, even though it wasn't a Super Bowl, Greg Williams a couple of weeks ago, his play was pretty much up there with the cover 0. So
that's right.
Unbelievable. And then, so I have a question. How did you rush for 1,000 yards in 76 without ever starting a game?
thank God. And I do this and I tell people this all the time. My heart, I have a very warm spot in my heart for the Cleveland Browns. Now it's a big rivalry. We're in the same division and, and it's always been a big rivalry, except for me. So I love the Browns only because of the fact that Joe Turkey Jones, who has played a defensive end for the Cleveland
Turkey
Browns.
is his nickname? Turkey?
Yeah, Turkey. Yeah. And he sacked Bradshaw in the game early in the season, and he pile drove him into the ground. And Bradshaw was like a fish out of water, so they carry him off the field, and he's out for the remaining part of the season. And our backup quarterback is a rookie, Mike Krushek. And all of a sudden, we got a rookie quarterback. So now what they have to do is pare down the offense. So he pares down the offense. And Mike, for the remaining, 7, 8 games, he throws 17 times.
In 8 games?
In 8 games. Obviously, we're running the football.
Yeah.
And we run the football, and we run the football, and we run the football. And because of Joe Turkey Jones, I gain 1,000 yards rushing.
Wow. 17
That's how
times,
it happened.
17
times.
games?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
That's wild. And then so when 2 more Super Bowls, what you get 4, which is incredible. And then like what made you decide to hang it up?
Well, so the decision on hanging it up, it's something that player faces. So we're playing in Super Bowl 14, and it starts with the media. So you get 2 weeks before the game. It lasts, the championship game and then the Super Bowl. We got 2 weeks. So the sports writers need to write stories. They got to fill pages. They got to talk about something. So one of the sports writers in Pittsburgh said, "Wait, Rock, did you ever think about retiring?" No. Why? Well, you're getting older. You didn't start at the beginning of the season. Got some young running backs coming up. Just a thought. Have you thought about retiring? They always say, go out on top. What better way than after the Super Bowl? Well, I hadn't thought about it, but now it got me to think about it. Okay, so I was thinking about, talking over with some people. You got to make the choice. And I suppose part of your own ego is that you want to make the choice. You don't want to be cut or asked to retire by the coaching staff or the ownership. And so, so I said, well, what do you think? So anyway, so at the time, they were shooting the Rocky Bleier story for ABC. And it was to be aired the following December 1980. And so my producer goes, "No, you can't retire. We got this publicity. We're going to go, you have to be around. You got to play another year so that we can say farewell to Rock here, and build up on this whole thing." So anyway, I go, "Oh, okay, fine." And so I said, "Okay, I'll play one more year." Not that I had a choice. To play, but so I went to ask Dan Rooney. I said, "Dan, and just to give him a heads up, not that they would have missed me, but just a courtesy, saying this is going to be my last season. This will be my last season. I just wanted to let you know, and thank you for everything that you've done for me," and so on. And I said to him, "Should I tell Chuck Noll?" And he thought for a moment, because in my mind is the reason I asked that, because sometimes with Chuck it's like, if you're thinking about retiring, then you've already retired. So why don't you just retire now? I didn't want to bring it up to him. And so I said to Dan, I said, "Wait, you should have talked about Chuck." And he thinks, he goes, "Nah, let's just wait and see what happens." I said, "Okay." And that was it.
Do you remember where you were the first time you saw Joe Green's Coke commercial?
Oh, yeah. It was pretty cool. Yeah, I thought it was.
Were you guys like applauding him after? Where do you remember where you were when you first saw it, or were you guys in the Super Bowl that year?
We
79?
no, 79. Yeah, we were. Yes, it was. Yeah, it was. Out in L.A. We were playing in the Super Bowl that year.
Did you see it ahead of the game, or did you see it after?
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, I really can't remember when I saw it. I can't remember. It was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I thought he captured Joe spot on. I mean, he hit from an attitude point of view, from a look point of view, because I've seen him give that look many times to many fans. Like, don't bother me, kid.
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
But it was cool.
Yeah, and I just go, one last question for you. So I think that the Steelers are the epitome of what every NFL organization aspires to be. What do you think sets them apart that they've just had nothing but unparalleled success over the last half century?
I who knows? I mean, who knows? Except for the fact, I think this is that from an ownership point of view, and from a structure point of view, is that they've done a pretty good job of where their places in the hierarchy. When and it continued to do so. We don't have a general manager, or we didn't have a general manager until maybe eight years ago or so. So we had a business guy, he had a business development, whatever it was. So I had ownership who did owner business. You had Chuck Noll, who ran the team. And then you had the players. So it was very linear of where it was. You didn't have a owner trying to be a head coach, or a general manager trying to be an owner, or a player trying to be a coach. I mean, everybody had their, and so I thought that was very important, and there wasn't a lot of confusion from the players' point of view. You just knew where the power structure was and how it goes. Secondly, is that when you and I don't know but when you make a decision of who you're going to have as your head coaches, and you spent the time and the effort to vet that person from a philosophy point of view, from a morals point of view, just from a character point of view, you spend that time. Well, then you got to give that person, and that's the person you choose. Then you got to give that person a chance, because it's not always that person. And in this case, it was Chuck Noll was there for 26 years, and then they passed the reins off. Who was the second coach?
Mike Cowher. Bill Cowher.
Yeah, Bill Cowher. So excuse me, Bill. I apologize for a little slip. My memory's going. Bill Cowher. And Bill was there 14 years, I think, and then Mike Tomlin, and so it's kind of that continuity, and I also think this as well is that when you're when your investment is $2,500, it's different than $750 million. So your return on your investment has been made and over and over again. So you got that luxury. But a lot of times I think that you go, oh, I pay X amount of money, I need to have a return, I need to get the right guys to be able to do that, or, whatever. But I think that's really the essence of their success.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's really all the questions I really do have for you. I do appreciate you so much for taking the time to chat. Tell your story. It's been awesome. We got the Steelers, Bengals. Hopefully they can get back on track.
Right.
This has been a blast.
It'll be great. I appreciate it.